part 2 of our Sacred Self-Healing Experience workshop series, examining, inquiring, and discovering the aspects of trust in our life. My name is Jona Bryndis. You guys all know me, and this workshop is part of our Sacred Self-Healing program. I hope that you've enjoyed the first part where we went pretty deep into the pillars of trust and the value of trust and what trust even means. And there was a wonderful participation. You guys all worked with me here together in working out what these things are that help us to trust, what these things are that destroy trust, and why it's so important to work on this. Today, we want to dive just a little deeper into the duality of trust, the paradoxum that we meet there, and follow up on our assignment of part 1, namely to come up with a list, or at least think about what these things are in our personal lives that we should probably trust more or trust less, forming sort of an inner truth compass, trust compass that helps us to better discern. And then we will look into the practical steps that it takes to really work on ourselves, mostly because we now understanding that this mutual exchange that we are all seeking through connecting and having relationships with others, that this requires trust, and how we can get out of our minds. And then we're going to look into the steps to rebuild trust if our trust was broken, misused, abused, betrayed. So today we're going to dive a little deeper into what it means to us as truth seekers, as people who have already chosen to be an active participant in life, to be on our journey here as self-discoverers and self-healers. And so we're going to have to evaluate everything that we learn here today based on the value that trust has for us, namely that it increases our overall affluence in life, our overall productivity, and that it makes things a lot more reliable for us, and that it also can motivate us and create more room for growth and help us with general decision making and our own congruence, our own integrity level. So keep that in mind, all right, because a big part of us losing trust is forgetting about the benefits of that. So yeah, guys, since part 1, we've had 2 weeks in between. How is your awareness of trust growing for you? Perhaps some takeaways or some deeper insights as a result of just really going into this place where we take this apart and become aware of all these different factors. Does anybody want to comment or share takeaways? What about blind trust? Is that something that has come across your awareness, perhaps? Since we talked a lot about this, and also the parts in us that are perhaps working against discerning whether we can trust someone or not. Janet is sharing, I've just been more aware of the finer aspects of trust overall. Yeah. For me, it was a huge eye opener when I started to really contemplate about trust and how many things in my life I do based on blind trust. And I had to do some soul searching there because, as I've mentioned last time, it's not aware to us because we have all these ideas about how life is, how nature is, how love is, and how relationships are. But I had to admit this to myself, that blindly trusting in things is kind of lazy on my part, on my end, because there are some things I'll share a few personal things here with you. I never really lock my car door. I never lock my um, things away. Do you know what I mean? And so I don't want to like invite other people, but I believe that if I can maintain an energetic bubble around me that is trustworthy, that I will just simply not invite that. And there's some truth in that. But there's also reality about this. And last week, my car was broken into. And this sounds, dramatic. It really wasn't. It happened at 3 a.m. I was still working. I was working outside. I saw the guy, and it scared me a little bit. But then I went inside, and then half an hour later, I came back outside, and the guy was still there. And I'm like, dang, this is a little weird. So I got Jeff, and Jeff talked to the guy, and then he ran away, and then he came back. And it was so weird. And I finally called the cops, and I said, well, there's somebody who's hovering there in my front yard and keeps on going to my car. And it was one of those like really cold nights. So I thought, well, maybe it's a homeless person that, just needs sort of a warmer place. And the cop said, well, is your car unlocked? And I'm like, yeah. And then she looked at me like rolling her eyes, and I'm like, yeah. Well, it turns out that this particular experience wasn't what you might assume. It was a 13-year-old boy, neighborhood boy, who was so full of drugs that he literally had absolutely no understanding of what he was doing. He was so far out, so far gone. And the cops talked with him, and I had the chance to talk to him the next day. And yeah, there's a lot more to this story than perhaps me coming to the conclusion, oh, I should, lock my car, you know. Yeah, there's something else that has come out of that, namely the opportunity for me to talk with him and perhaps offer some healing. So we can, due to our own alignment and our own intentions, shift certain things in life that may appear as a betrayal or a threat. Okay, but that requires a lot of courage to do this and a conscious choice. Now, ask me, am I locking my car door now after this experience? What do you guys think? Make a bet. Do you think I'm locking my car now or not?
I'm going to say you're locking your car now.
Okay, Becky says the same thing. Yeah. I'm actually not. So, does this make me someone who is in self deceit? Am I deceiving myself here? Okay. Or is this a conscious choice
Can you
to not?
can you hear me, Jona?
Yes, yes, Janet, I
It
can.
seems like a conscious choice. I had a wave, like, because I also was the no lock the front door car thing. And last week I had this weird wave of like stealing. Like somebody's gonna steal something. And it wasn't, I could tell it was almost wasn't even me, but I just got that
Mm-hmm.
feeling, and that those are the
Mm-hmm.
words it translated to. And so it allowed that wave somehow kind of came and went, and then it was very uncomfortable. But then now I feel like I held my ground through it, and I can still make a decision whether or not where I want to put the key, if I'm going to lock the door, and I'm going to be okay, and nobody's going to steal anything,
Mm-hmm.
because that fear, like that's something, a wave
Exactly.
that can
Yeah.
go through
I
from
mean,
somebody. I could have gotten hit. I could have thought of somebody who has that constant fear and who keeps getting stolen from. So
right. And
it took a moment. Yeah.
some of us may have been in this place, it's like when you're constantly afraid of somebody stealing something from you or taking something away, it kind of seems to manifest in that way. But if I was a true realist, I would say, well, but Janet, I mean, houses and cars have locks for that purpose. Okay, so I hear you, and I wanted us to go down this path here for a second, this rabbit hole, to feel the paradox of trust. So the reasoning, okay, so what I am telling myself is that I choose to trust. I choose to trust. And what helps is that my car is an old car and there is nothing of value in that car. In my mind, in my framework, and my belief system, I can afford to trust. And yes, Amanda is sharing here blind trust as a healer, that people come with the true intention of healing. That is a blind trust, Amanda. So you are learning this discernment and the boundaries here. Would you like to elaborate on that? Because that's something as self-healers and healers that we can also call a paradox. Okay, we believe that people want truth, that people want healing, but is that always the case? What's your experience here, Amanda?
Um, you know, I'm just getting the opportunity to navigate that experience as I expand more and people come to me more. But I still do trust that when people come, their true self does want the truth, right? Does really want that. But um, then there comes a point of maintaining boundaries and the discernment when you discover that that might not be the case, or that this, you know, the teachings that I have or what I have to give are not right for that particular person, and saying so.
Okay, so what I hear you say is that you have to trust that people come to you with the right intention. I think we should all trust in that. And that sometimes it's just not for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's okay too. And to trust in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And to give other people the freedom to choose that. That's what I hear you say.
Mm-hmm.
Is a deeper
and
form of
to
trust.
and to stand for and respect my own boundaries, because
Exactly.
they're, you know, that is the, you know, the unhealed healer in me
Yeah.
still gets a little wiggly sometimes, and then I have to really practice and remember that healed part of me that says that is able to um, have and maintain and appropriately assert those boundaries.
Mhm. Yeah, so a very important keyword here, the unhealed healer, in conjunction with trust and in relationships, and when we interact with people as healers or self-healers, assuming, right, that we can offer healing. Okay, so this might be the case, but at the end of the day, healing is just like trust, something somebody needs to choose. Okay, and that's not something that we can bestow onto others,
No.
or that only our way of healing is the right way or the way for that person. So when we as healers get trapped into that idea, then we begin to lose, or we run into the danger of losing ourselves in the other. We're losing our boundaries. We're losing our own needs and our own, integrity or authenticity sometimes. Okay, because we get so focused on what we think the other person needs that we no longer uh, worst case scenario, are that we no longer true to ourselves. On the other hand, if we heal for, or want to heal for the sake of proving to ourselves that we're the greatest healer in the world, and that we've something like reinvented the wheel or whatever, then we can lose ourselves in ourselves and lose our authenticity and our trustworthiness as well. So the unhealed healer is not trustworthy. Okay, and that's something we got to understand. The only people who trust in unhealed healers, do you guys have a guess? Are other unhealed healers.
Victim type people?
Not necessarily, but an unhealed, yes, I mean, an unhealed healer is a wounded healer. Okay, so to a degree, victimization plays a role in there. But like say, let's take the word healer out of this and just say a person whose trust has been violated or has been betrayed a lot. Yeah, that's a wounded person, because this person has a hard time, trusting altogether. And as a result of that, this person can, come to two conclusions, or one out of two. One is nobody is trustworthy. Only I can decide, or I can choose what is good for me, and I should stay away from other people. Or go into the opposite direction and externalize that power and seek, other people to fix this for me. Can you see the transition here from just being a normal person to self-healer to a healer? We all have a healer in us, all right? And so there's this gray area between self-healing and healing, between doing this for ourselves and offering this to others, is a very, very small one. Okay, the main point here being that the trust itself plays a major role in this. And what is it that I'm trusting? Am I trusting in you as a person? Am I trusting in the modality that you have? Or am I giving up? Am I blindly trusting all my power to you and pull you in to heal me, to fix me? Okay. And here you can see the duality of that. All right. Because we want this mutual exchange, and trust in relationships helps to facilitate growth and helps to facilitate healing. Okay. It motivates to heal, but it has to be reciprocal. It has to be based on both people knowing who they are. So what you brought in, Amanda, is a very important point, namely that when we go into this world as a healer, as a person, as a mother, as a son, as a husband, doesn't matter, and we want to go into trust in the relationship with the other, or this can also be a group. We talked about this, society and family and so forth. So it's not just in a romantic sense. Then we need to be able to make that decision from a place of knowing exactly what it is that we're trusting in, and what it is that we are offering, and what we're getting back. And this may sound a little mental right now, because we all look at trust more as a sort of an intuitive thing. But research actually shows that that is not the case. So there is a lot more to this choice to trust in other people. All right. And that's why this investigation of what should we trust more in and what should we trust less in is extremely important. Because without this discernment, like Amanda already pointed out, there's a lot of misunderstanding, disappointment. There's a danger too. There's a lot of ego traps with this. And after all, with the example with the car, Also, the manifestation of, or unconscious manifestation of, just like us not fully being present. So we have to be really present here when it comes to investigating what we are trusting in and why we're trusting in it. And this takes time, and this takes work, self work, and work with others. And also, to a certain degree, takes time to educate ourselves a little bit about this, to contemplate, all right, and to really feel into what this trust actually means in conjunction with each person, each situation, each place individually. And then, of course, also, the work to actually become trustworthy for others. So this whole investigation here of what should I trust less in and what should I trust more in inevitably points back to ourselves, namely, am I trustworthy? Am I trusting in myself, or am I just deceiving myself? And most of you know this from your own self-healing work, that one of the first phases of self-healing is, and this is often also the longest phase, is the discovery of all the self-deception. Okay, this is often quite uncomfortable, yeah, but also eye-opening. And this is the purpose of these workshops, to help us to discern this more. So we're getting to this question as self-healers, obviously, as spiritually oriented people. On one hand, we are asked to trust more, to trust in our energy, to trust in our sensations, to trust in divine order, to trust in nature. But on the other hand, we are discovering how much of this trust is actually getting us into trouble or leading to manifestations that are, well, sometimes even sabotaging to our goals or to our self-expression. So we have to start this investigation with a very, very open mind, like Denise pointed out in part one, to even discover our own error perceptions here. And then learn to accept that the way things look like to us are not necessarily always the way they are. Just because they are real for us doesn't mean that they're true. And so we have to question if I'm supposed to trust more, but if it turns out that it's all based on self-deception and I end up questioning myself more, where does this lead me? And this is probably where most of you are, caught in this duality between hearing the message that you need to trust more and discovering that your perception is fallible, and questioning yourself as a consequence of that more and more. So it seems at first, when we enter the self-healing journey, that the more we look into our own truth with ourselves, the less we can trust ourselves. Can you give me a hand sign here? Who of you can relate to what I just said? Who of you went through or is going through exactly that duality? Like, you hear this message all the time, trust, trust, trust. But then at the same time, you find out how not trustworthy you and your perception is, right? And question yourself. Yeah, that's almost all of you. And that's the biggest hurdle when it comes to trusting, guys. It's recognizing that it's not us that we need to question. It's just our perception, and our perception is not who we are. Okay, it's mostly, for most of us, based on our past experiences and our references, such as culture, conditioning, and so forth. So that's what we have to learn to question. We have to question where we even get that info from. Okay, and here's sort of a little sticky note for you. Being in our mind only corrupts and sabotages your intention to grow, and with it, also your ability to trust. Why is that? Why do you guys think being in your mind alone corrupts and sabotages?
This is Becky. Because the mind only knows what it knows. It only knows the past and what kind of project that into the future instead of actually growing.
That's fine. So can you explain this a little more, Becky? What do you mean with the past being the problem? What about that? What about the past?
Like if we are in our minds, like past programming, past conditioning, past beliefs, it could like only that's only what we can tap into with our mind.
You mean like memories or experiences, like the stuff that we have sort of stored as our learning in the past?
Yes.
But our learning is also what makes us grow, right? What makes us mature. So how can we, why is the past often a problem? Maybe make an example how you perhaps found out that it's a problem for you at times.
Because it can, like for example, if I have trust issues with certain people, maybe some people remind me of like trust issues I have with my parents, perhaps, but these people aren't my parents. But I'm projecting that mistrust from what I experienced with my parents onto these people because I believe kind of like my parents or so in a certain way. And it doesn't really open the possibility of something else.
So almost like a muscle memory or a conditioning, right? We've experienced a trauma there, and the mind tends to be sort of superficial in that way. No, it takes certain triggers and then it says, "Oh, it's because you know you can't. It's because or it comes up with all these past experiences, especially the negative kind, right?
Yes.
But am I a lost case here, Becky? What do you think? Or is this something that can be explained through the mind? Can you explain that with your mind?
No. What comes up is more like you talked about earlier. I guess it's the conscious choice whether you want that to lead you rather than the greatness that you have.
Yeah, it's correct. It's correct. I want to use my mind as a tool, and I want it to be there. I want it to give me the statistics. I want it. I want it to inform me. I want it to give me all those, even the memories of past experiences. And my conclusion is, and this is, you don't see this at first, that you can't trust at all when it comes to the car. And so what I do is I just don't leave anything in there. I just don't make my car a big thing. I just don't get attached to my car in the first place. It has no meaning to me. It is insured, but I don't leave anything in there. So I'm using my mind, and my mind says, okay, your car can be broken in at any time. I might as well leave the door open and you don't have to pay for the glass. I mean, some states in the United States and some countries pay for that. Some don't. Where I live, they didn't. So you hear what I'm saying? So it's not that I am not trusting in my mind, but I'm not letting it come to undifferentiated conclusions, namely that I have to build in more security into my car. What am I energizing if I build in more security into my car, and protect it more and more and more?
Fear.
Yeah, there's a danger of that. So obviously, this is just a car. Okay, do I lock my house? I do. I do because I have children. Okay, I do lock the house at night when I go to sleep. Um, Not during the day when I'm going in and out all day long. But yes, my house is locked because I do not want to deal with that kind of situation. I wouldn't be able to take responsibility for that. Okay, if something were to happen, while we're asleep. So I use my mind as a sharp tool to inform me about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And yes, you can still argue with me that I'm deceiving myself here about my rationalization why to leave the car open. Okay, but truth is, it's an old car, so I don't really worry about it. I'm not attached to it in no way, and so it's energy that I don't want to spend on something that if it has some damage, I probably get more money from the insurance than it's worth. So it's in our discernment to come to this conclusion if we are grounded and centered within ourselves to take responsibility for our conscious choices, with the emphasis on conscious. The problem only occurs, and this is where we run into the paradox with our with trust and especially with our mind alone, is that when we are not aware and when we're not making conscious choices, then it, of course, kind of appears that way, that life is unfair or life just happens to me, or why does this always happen to me and not to others? Yeah, can you give me a hand sign here? Who's caught themselves in that place, so taking everything personal and thinking that, oh, it's just me, whom these kind of things happen to. All right, and this is always a sign, okay, that you are not really in tune. You're not fully present. Remember when I said you only stump your toe when you're distracted? These little accidents, they happen when we're not fully present with our body, or present, in our awareness, or present with our feelings, with our emotions, or also sometimes with our inner cues. And this is the part here that I get asked a lot, namely, well, why is it that we ignore our inner cues? All right, so many people say the same thing. They say, I felt it right there, right then. I had this inner prompting, or I had this feeling about this guy, or about this job, or about. Raise your hand real quick. Who's heard himself, herself say this? I knew it. I had this feeling. I knew it right away. Okay, that's all of you guys. Wonderful. Because yes, especially as energetically sensitives, you constantly have inner impulses and promptings, but something in you still doesn't listen to them. What is that in you guys? Do you know? Does anybody want to share?
Well, I know for me this last time that I remember, I know, I mean, I can like, I'm looking at myself in that position right now. When I didn't listen at that moment, I wound up in such a horrible situation afterwards. I told you the whole story. You've heard
Mhm,
it, Jonah. But
mhm.
that moment, it didn't make sense logically. Janet, don't just stay. It was, it wasn't even a word. It was just like something that kind of held me there, but something pushed me forward, and I went ahead and dived into the whole thing. And I don't think it'll ever be forgotten by me, that feeling. And that constantly now is my little beacon. It was like all the darkness has been sticked away. If I need to check in with something, I just kind of remember that moment and go, okay, where is that middle? Nothing else in the way, because the consequences of not listening that time were horrible. So I
right?
learned the hard way.
In that example for you, um, that is obvious. Can you recall smaller things where you would have similar cues? I mean,
Oh,
the
you
things
know
that
what it was?
traumatize
It
us.
was a buildup of little cues. It really was. It was in the relationship with the father of my kids. I had been granted I could live with them. And all these little things I let slip just because I didn't want to get involved in the court because he wasn't listening. So I kept letting little things slip that weren't like big earth-shaking intuitions. They were just little promptings of just, Janet, watch out, just
Hmm.
really gentle things. And I didn't listen to that gentle voice. And I had studied years knowing about the gentle voice. So sometimes I would listen, but when it really came to my own well-being, I didn't listen. And I really have learned that lesson now.
Yeah, so this is important what you just said, that it's often not just this one thing. It's like all the little things, all the little promptings. It's here and there, and it seems to compound. And in hindsight, it's always so obvious, right? But in the moment, it's the little things that we let slip.
Well, as a
The little
person
bounce.
deciding, you know what the warning is, was people shouldn't be afraid, but once you're going to commit to this, okay, we can all sit here outside of our bodies talking about this, but the wake up is I've committed to this. And so that's going to be there for me. So I should respect it. And a good thing to remember, like what came to me right now is uh, listen to it all the way around the wheel. Listen to
Hmm.
that intuition all the way around the wheel, just like you would look at it consciously about my friendships, about my food, about my exercise.
Hmm.
Check the whole wheel every once in a while, that lovely inventory.
So
Because
what I sorry.
you're not building trust in yourself then at that point. If you've committed to say, oh, I'm going to live by my intuition now, and then actually living it is a much more silent
Hmm.
uh, thing that doesn't have a lot of preaching to it, but it has a lot of experience, that's for certain.
So you just confirmed basically the paradoxum, the necessity to really consciously work with this. Because on one hand, if you only look at things from the mental or ego mind perspective, right, a lot of things won't make sense. And you will, decide by sort of a rationale, and that rationale will sound very rational, okay? But you might have to disregard something that comes from a deeper place, more like this subtle voice that you've mentioned. But if you only trust in the subtle voice, well, then it's often difficult to make sense of that either. So we have to find the middle way. We have to find that part in us, and you are absolutely right here, Janet. It has a lot to do with experience. It has a lot to do with paying attention, with being present with that and learning and maturing and growing through that. So I like that, that conclusion here, that this is something that can not sort of be, this is not a havingness or owningness. This is not a gettingness. We don't get that anywhere. We have to build that for ourselves and learn to trust in our inner sensations and our inner promptings and our impulses, as well as our mind and the realism about certain things. Now, who of you has experienced the opposite? Maybe always just trusting in your inner promptings and never really getting anywhere with it. Perhaps even seeing signs in everything, or um, going into like the bigger, higher route type of thinking. Do you want to share? Who of you has experienced the complete opposite of not listening to your inner promptings, but constantly listening to your inner promptings and then being confused or not really knowing, what it actually means?
Oh, I was thinking of more of like externalized, how I was seeing it. where
Okay,
I
so that where you're not trusting in either.
yeah, right.
Neither your mind nor your inner prompting, right? Where
Exactly.
you okay, that's the third part of that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But,
How does that feel?
it's confusing. Yeah, because it's like, oh, I can make meaning out of something if I want to. And then I see something then that's the opposite of the meaning I just made, and that's a different meaning.
So you get all the pros and the cons constantly going back and forth. And then
No,
what does that make you do?
oh my gosh, it's crazy making in my mind. I don't trust anything, and then it's like then I'm in a place where I don't even know, and I lose complete connection with anything, and in like my inner promptings or anything like that. And then then it's like anything and everything is open to rationalizing, and I get stuck
Or
in
outer impulses, like you said, the externalization,
yeah,
right? Other people's opinions or
yes.
validation or not.
That's where it goes to validation from others, then that this is right or wrong.
So we see this is a huge topic, actually, if you really allow yourself to dive into this. I mean, you guys already shared things here that are massive in our lives, right? So we have the only trusting in our mind, which makes us experience our life kind of as not making sense. Okay, so kind of like confused to a certain degree, and trying to be good and following the rationale doesn't actually allow us to grow. Then the opposite of not trusting in our mind and going into our feeling only, which can lead to blindly trusting in things and trying to find signs and everything, and just sort of constantly sort of just being at the influence of the current flow or the fluctuation that is there. Or the third place, which is more or less a combination of both, where we don't trust in anything anymore, and where we become so apathic to a certain degree, or passive, all right, that in order to grow or to move forward or to have any kind of motivation, we need energy from the outside. We need to seek that on the outside. We become dependent, and that's exactly really what's underneath the duality of trust, and why we have to become more aware of it. And to navigate this is now sort of the workshop part here, namely, well, from all that you guys have learned in your life, in your reflection of life, and through your experiences, what is it that you came up with that you should doubt more, that you should distrust more? One thing I just heard you say, Becky, yeah, is this rationalization,
Yeah,
right? This going back and forth, right?
yeah, but or well, what if?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, buts. Yeah, buts. And what else? What was it? What was the other example that you just made?
Well, what if this
Oh,
stuff?
the what ifs. Yeah. What else? That's enough, I think, for us to tune into this. So the rationalization of, like, or let's call this mentalization. Okay, mentalization, because rationalization is another step of that. That's finding a rationale for everything. Do you guys know that too? Like being able to find a good reason for anything, right? Always being able to find a pro. Okay. Okay. What else? What else do you should you distrust more in your life experience? I have a big one, and I still use this every day today. Justifications. If I hear myself needing to justify something, that's a red flag for me. That means there's some kind of inner conflict or incongruence, because if I need to justify, that means there's a part in me that must not agree with it entirely. There must be a part of me that is not congruent with this, and in order to perceive myself or make it right for me, I have to have a justification. And this is also what I use with other people. It's like the more they justify, the less I trust them. Someone who says to me, when I say, why are you doing this? And they say, because it feels right. I trust that person more than someone who gives me half an hour explanation of why it's the best thing to do that. What about you guys? What have you found out about yourself that you should not, or other people in that, for that matter, that you should trust less in?
Jona, I came up with something. There's something about being like, if I do it or if somebody else is doing, there's something lost in the whole experience of being like overburdened. Like if I suddenly, it's very egoish to suddenly go, oh, I have such a busy day and I have all this big list of things to do and to rush through the, like boom, boom, boom. I'm kind of generalizing it a little bit too much, but if I'm doing that to myself, or if somebody else is doing the same thing to me, I know there's something distrustful in there, because it's blinding. It's not even making a blind faith. It's kind of blinding out any opportunity for anything else. So
do you mean
the
distraction of it, or the overburdening? You said like in the sense of just extending yourself, stretching yourself to sin.
Oh, that's two different ways. Yeah, there's two different ways there. You could get overburdened as a means of absolute distraction from something else. And then there's, of course, like getting stretched too thin doing this. Usually it's a lot of times it's going to be things you're doing over and over again, or I'm doing over and over again.
Isn't what you're saying relating to finding yourself in a place where you just try to cope, where you just try to get through with something, where you just try to make it, where you
sort of, that's kind of like a third dimension of, I think the mental like, okay, now do this. I don't know, there's a very fine line. Yeah, there's the mental like,
so there's a bit of an autopilot aspect to it, right? Where you just like, because there's so much, right, that you don't even feel into things anymore. You just keep going. You just keep going, right? And then there's the distraction aspect. That this is not we're not always conscious, or there's not always a hidden distraction. Sometimes there's just like an outer distraction. Okay, we can get very distracted just by the amount of things that we do, or by the noise that is around us, or do you know what I mean?
Mesmerization. It's like this, because this trust, I think, goes with wake up. So it's like a mesmerization. If something mesmerizes you, or you're mesmerizing yourself, or I'm mesmerized, suddenly find myself mesmerized, and like, okay, wake up, what's going on? You have to be able to, because that kind of wipes out trust, because not really there.
Yeah, it hijacks our attention. right? That's really
And
what
other people
happens.
do it. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
society does that too. If you run into
Mm-hmm.
somebody who you start to have a conversation with and over again, walk away from that conversation going, wait a minute, what just happened there? You know, like the cups shifted around and then the ball was over there and then it was over there and then,
Yeah. It's a
yeah.
very good example. I agree. This is a good example. What else? Especially in conjunction with other people. I mean, obviously there are some things, you know, such as clear sort of selfishness, self-bias, self-centeredness, right? That we should, I mean, that's a non-brainer uh, uh, for us as empaths, as energetically sensitive. So don't just think of yourself, also think of like the path that Janet was going right now, like recall situations with others and maybe even day-to-day situations that can really sort of, you know, sabotage trust in whatever way, maybe, you know, whether it's the way towards ourselves or the way, the trust towards ourselves or to others. When somebody clearly is self-biased, you know, when it's all about them. That's something I literally had to learn as a formerly unhealed healer, you know, to not enable that, you know, because I found myself a lot in places where I was actually enabling that other people would make everything about themselves, and I would even go into this. Do you guys know what I mean? When I catch myself doing that, I immediately know that there's is an issue here that I need to pay attention. Specialness, probably the better word here. Also, my own specialness, obviously. Guys, what about beliefs and ideologies? Sort of rigid thinking. Do you guys know what I mean? When someone is very strict in their beliefs, perhaps even righteous.
Yeah, that can be so hidden. Like
Mm-hmm.
again, I've just kind of had the same kind of a thing. I actually wrote in my journal, I said this person is, and I started putting people in their clusters where they kind of surface out of there, and they're like, oh, they're from the rigid thinking cluster.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I say, suddenly, or they have a different, they actually have a hidden agenda that suddenly surfaces out of this person that I didn't even expect. So this rigid thinking thing, I think is highly overlooked, perhaps, in the land of wanting to just be really
Mm-hmm.
at ease in the world.
Generalizing. You mentioned this earlier, actually, the
But
word.
it starts to hook
Yeah.
into brainwashing because that
Mm-hmm.
person,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not to get caught up in that web.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I
one
also,
other thing
yeah.
where my my trust gets confused, it's not till after I left the conversation where I realized what happened, is that the the premise that, you know, saying that I am for me means that I am against you, or
Oh,
um,
yeah.
getting caught up in saying that, you know, this is a need you have, and then it gets construed into being, so that means that I'm against what you want to
Mm-hmm.
do, and then before you know it, you're conceding because you want to respect the other person, and then you realize, wait, it didn't have to be one or the other. I wasn't against them in the first place. Like, how did saying, you know, this lead to me being against you somehow? Like,
Right.
that is one thing, and then it's not till later that I realized that that happened.
It's a very good point, Amanda. It's what I often call polarizing or separating. You know, a split. It's a split. okay, where all of a sudden there's only either or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, good or bad. There's no middle anymore. You know, I can't just be neutral. Okay, so it's when I can feel this within myself, with, you know, others or in others. It's also when people get very defensive, and also when I get very defensive. You guys figured this out with yourself, that when you get defensive, who of you has ever felt this, or perhaps frequently experiences this, the need to defend yourself? I used to have this almost continually, all the time when I was younger. I always felt like I had to defend myself. I always felt attacked. This, you know, is basically what follows the separating and the polarizing. Now, sometimes it's also us who can do that, okay, because we are insecure or unaware. All right, if we go into defensiveness, we talked about this last time, this can also be perceived as aggressive, okay, and then the other person responds to it in their defensiveness, and then the whole thing sort of trampolines itself, it escalates, right? So that's why I like the way you said that, Amanda, because we have to catch that when that starts happening. But in general, the more people defend themselves, and this also goes along with justifications, the less trustworthy they appear to me. And that's why I had to really keep a close eye onto my own self-defense mechanisms. What about people who are just completely, you know, relying on rationality? That's different from rationalizations, like logic. People who constantly, and I was in that place before, where it's all just, where it has to be logic, where it has to, you know, where they say, oh, well, give me the proof for that, or, you know, sort of science-based, or you know, where it has to be something, you know, that is secular approvable. Becky, did you want to add to that?
I was thinking of it in a different way. I think maybe I was thinking something different, actually. Where like the logic doesn't make sense. Like when someone says, I'm saying this because I care about your well-being, or I'm saying this because I care about you, but in reality, what they're saying or what they're doing is nothing to do with you, it has to do with them. I don't know.
Right. So what I hear you say right now, Becky, is that you're starting to discern more. Okay, you can tell obviously there's sort of gray areas between them. It's a realm. It's a realm. Okay, it's not an either or. So you know, whether you know, people often use rationales and say it's rational or logic, but it really isn't at all. It's a rationalization. Okay, or a lot of times it is a justification, or perhaps even, you know, like Janet mentioned, a form of deceit, okay, to distract you from, you know, recognizing that it is not logical at all. That's something we need to distrust more. We need to question that. That's a major tool that we have to inquire back and say, wait a minute, you just said blah 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 blah, and to me that means blah 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 blah. How does that match up with what you said earlier? Right, to actually really go into the logic of it and say, wait, you are punishing me because you love me, And because you love me, you're just doing that to what? To prove what to me? Or how does you punishing me out of love show me that you love me? Yeah, to really go in there and take these things that people, or again here, this can also be ourselves, all right, to take these statements and the actions and the things that people, you know, say why they're doing things, and inquire about them. And it doesn't always mean that they have malintent. It just means that we really need to cultivate that, to question what is at hand, not ourself, but our perception. Okay, to question our perception means to inquire about the meaning of what is being said or expressed or done, so that you can trust with the intention of wanting to trust in mind. Yeah, a client sends me an email, complains about what I did or what I said, and blah, 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 blah. And then the second sentence is, yeah, but don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not blah, 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 blah. I'm only saying this because blah, 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 blah. And just so you know, I've always felt that. And, when you talk in that way, I no longer want to have coaching sessions with you. So, do you hear something there? It's a realm, okay? So, a lot of times this is defensiveness. So when people get called out on their justifications, rationalizations, distractions, righteousness, and so forth, they react in a way that they sort of bring in more logic and more false rationale. Okay, so calling things out, inquiring about the truth level of what is being said, done, or expressed is a major tool for us. It doesn't have to lead to questioning everything, but when things don't feel right inside of us, we need to question them. There is one more aspect here that we should trust less in, and that's something very subjective that has to do with our sense of normal. A lot of people have quite low pain thresholds. Okay, in other words, or very high pain thresholds. In other words, they live in such a toxic environment or relationship, or have experienced so much trauma, so much betrayal, that their thresholds are skewed. And so what they experience, subjectively experience as normal or as comfort zone, in and of itself becomes something that can no longer be trusted. Do you guys all understand what I am referring to? Victimhood is one of those things in life that can lead to that. We need to question our sense of normal. And with it
Jona,
also,
this happened. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, this kind of came up yesterday. I was like, all of a sudden felt like I was caught up in this gigantic wave of, and it had to do with, I'll say right now, it had to do with like talking to this new lawyer, and then also the work that I'm doing, and it's in education, and having put some work in, and then the person changing their mind and saying, oh, I want to go a different route after I had, submitted something that I don't even think I'm getting paid for. Between that and then a few other things, I just felt like I couldn't even logically respond to some of these people. and it was really tiring, obviously. And this sense of normal kind of came in. I was like, okay, how did I manifest this? I started going to me, and I decided last night, I said, okay, wait, first of all, what's in common with where this stress was coming from? And there were these two realms that had more to do with, like, quote unquote, the system. And it was like, you know, lawyer, new lawyer, the system of that, the education, getting paid. I said, maybe there's something happening there, and it isn't all me. I'm not like, it's because I was in a questioning place. And to me, this, it really had me off ground in terms of um, my my reality. I'm like, you
Yeah,
know,
sometimes
did I just drop the whole thing? Or, but you know, and saying, okay, well, maybe those, you know, like going, okay, where
yeah, I
they're
mean,
coming from is messed up right now. I'm not going to.
sometimes that's where our inquiry leads to, realizing that what we have agreed to say is so off the charts, not okay for us. And you know, sometimes it's really mind-boggling because we don't even understand how we got there. Okay, but this can happen. We can be sort of deceived into just accepting things and blindly trusting in things because they've always been that way.
Well, and two, part of the system is like a lot of pressure just to try to make you
Yeah,
do that too. I mean,
yeah,
that's like what you're right. Peer
especially with
pressure
jobs.
is, it's
Hmm.
like it's controlling somebody else, you know,
Yeah.
and where I fall under control of somebody else. How if I, you know, I'm in a position of needing help with something or needing an income, and these are the people I'm relying on, and just all of a sudden exploding and going, wait a minute,
Hmm.
you know, what can I trust? What can I not trust here?
Yeah, it's for me, it's always a sign when people say, well, when I inquire and I say, well, why are you doing this? Or what's the rationale behind this? And they come with the answer, well, that because we've always done it that way. In that moment, you know, I'm like, okay, well, keep doing what
Well,
you
that's
want
a
to do,
great thing to be able
but
to
I'm
even
not
stop.
doing it.
That's like a great thing, Yona, to share, to be able to stop at that moment and go, okay, well, to be able to flip it around in the middle of a conversation when I'm, you know,
Yeah.
feeling like your basics are being threatened, to say, what's your rationale with that? To come up with some question.
Yeah, the
Um,
question is always the
yeah.
same. And I say this over and over again. The first question to turn things around, not just as a defensive or persuasive measure, is to ask yourself, how am I truly feeling about what is being said or done? Okay, to check in with yourself. That always needs to be the first question. And the second question is, well, how am I seeing it? Yeah? So how am I judging this? How am I interpreting this? Again, self-reflective. And if we then come to the conclusion that we're not sure, then we need to inquire. And that inquiration, or I don't know the English word, can be self-inquiring. Okay, how did I even get here? What, you know, like of that sort, or asking the others involved, wait, I'm having a problem here. I'm not feeling it. Okay, I'm not getting it. Can you explain that to me? Can you show me? Can you, can you convince me? Basically asking the other, okay, to make his stance. And you'll see that probably 8 out of 10 times, people aren't really aware of what it actually is that they're saying or doing. And they really can't make a stance for what they're doing because they're not really trusting in it either. So the questioning is always the same, Janet. You have to question our perception, feel into what we're truly feeling. And if it doesn't feel conclusive for us, then do the inquiry outside of ourselves, depending on, you know, pertaining to whatever the situation or decision or whatever has to be made, whether it's with other people or, you know, about a place or about a job or whatever.
You know, it's a good thing to on here, just like with the other getting overburdened or being overpressured, because what I find in that kind of situation is I have, you know, I think a lot of Western society, a preconceived notion of when you have to make up a
Mm-hmm.
decision about something, when actually the reality of it was you needed to breathe for 2 days and something then
Mm-hmm.
allowed to surf, just like we've discussed
Mm-hmm.
before too. Yeah, anything that's time pressure, uh, beyond normal, you know, kind
Mm-hmm.
of things, anybody who's lying or being you
Yeah.
know,
Like,
deceptive.
you're
You know,
making a good point.
it's almost like deceptive is being
Mm-hmm.
deceptive. I wrote it today too. My journal's like, oh, this person is being acceptably deceptive. You know, like there's a certain, in some cultures, a certain amount of deception and lying and stuff
Mm-hmm.
that happens that people have suddenly adopted as being, oh yeah, that's how it's done. And you just go,
Right. And I mean, when you, in your case, you work internationally, you can't really use this against a different culture. You can't say, oh, I mean, obviously you can say I'm never gonna make a business with this or this country again. You can obviously come to a conclusion like that, but when it comes to cultural differences, you have to know these things. You have to understand that when you are, and I'm just giving you guys a few sort of stereotypical examples here, but when you are in the Middle East and you go to a street bazaar and you want to buy t-shirts or whatever, a bowl or whatever, it is expected in the Middle East that you negotiate. Okay, so if you agree to the price and then 5 minutes later, your friend comes and shows you the same t-shirt and says, oh, I only paid $5 for it, and you like, oh, wait a minute, and I paid 20 for it. Does this mean that this person that I dealt with ripped me off, or does it mean that I was so stupid not informing myself about the habits of this country, how trade is being done? Okay, so we have to stay neutral in that. So when I am making business, or this is a lot of times the case when we have intercultural or international relationships, we have to understand the frame of reference, that the framework that the person from the other culture has. Like I've mentioned this before, there are countries in which the language, the local language, doesn't have a word for no. It's the most insulting thing that you could do, to say no. And so that there's not even a word in that language for no, which means if you come as a typical sort of Western person and you ask them a question, can you do this and this to me? How are you going to experience that? They're going to say yes, but never do this. Does it mean that they are mean or deceptive or no? It means that you were just not really good at asking the right question. Okay, so what I'm pointing out here is that it's also important that we adapt. Okay, we have to find out and stay open for what it is that makes a person see it that way. So cultivating inquiry also means to really stay neutral and give the other person a chance to show it to you. Let me see your hands here, guys. And this is a seemingly dumb question, but it's important for us to make this aware to ourselves. How many times have you experienced in your life, or not how many times, has it ever happened to you that you interpreted the actions or the words of a person in a certain way and felt offended or felt unfairly treated until they had a chance to explain to you how they're seeing it, what their point of view is, and why they were doing this? Yeah, it happens to us all the time because we are not walking in other people's shoes, period. So there is a part in this whole trust distrust thing where we have to use our empathy as an instrument. Yeah, without my empathy, I will never really understand why the person in the Middle Eastern bazaar, okay, uh, thinks it's a good thing to negotiate with me, where I come from a country where that's considered to be ripoff, okay, and that there is no malintent, okay. So this is the part here that really shows us that without inquiry, we cannot really decide if we can trust or not trust. The last point that you were making here, Janet, about time pressure, being pressured, okay, or not given enough room. And obviously, again, this can also, of course, be self-reflective. So if we might sometimes not give ourselves enough room, especially in regards to learning and making mistakes. Do you guys know what I mean? Some people are so rigid and so confined in their options, and they don't realize why, okay, that they end up not choosing anything because there is absolutely no room for error. And realizing all these things about self-deceit of our own mind and even of our inner sensations should not lead to us questioning ourselves more. It should lead to us questioning our perception more. And sometimes by simply giving ourselves more space, or like you said, Janet, more time. Okay. So one of my most favorite interjections, and I use them every day. If somebody asks me something, or if somebody needs something from me, or if I have to agree to something or whatever, and say they propose something, and it's not conclusive for me, and let's say I've already inquired about their intention and all that, so I've done sort of my homework with this, right? And I've been empathic and felt it from his or her point of view, but it's still not conclusive. What do? I ask for more time. I ask for more space, for more room. I say, I still need to feel this out. I need to feel this out. Give me till tomorrow, or give me an hour, or whatever. And then I do whatever it is that I need to do, okay, to balance myself, to ground myself. Perhaps maybe I need to take a short walk or short nap, or maybe I need to eat something. A lot of times I have a hard time making decisions when I'm hungry. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you are out somewhere, let's say maybe you're traveling or whatever, and you want to find a restaurant and you can't really find a restaurant, or wherever you go, it's not really what and you get more and more and more hungry? Have you noticed how harder it becomes to decide where you're going to have dinner? Has any one of you ever experienced that? And then, so many times I've found myself like sitting in the car, like so hungry and so frustrated, and I could cry about, yes, and like crazy, right? And then it's just like, oh, whatever, when I go to a convenience store and just get myself a bag of chips, because I was so hungry I couldn't make a good decision at that moment. So this is very, very important that you become aware of this, and as we've already worked out together, that we learn to take enough time, all right, to feel into something. And if not just time, it requires our attention. And if we cannot feel it, we shouldn't trust it. In other words, you can't trust what you can't feel. All right, because if you can't feel it, and when I say feel, I'm not referring to your emotions, I'm referring to your inner congruence. All right, then that means it's not concluded yet. It's the process of choosing whether or not you want to trust isn't fully processed yet. Okay, and then you need more time. Eventually, of course, and this is something that people who have a hard time with making decisions sometimes miss, you have to revisit. You do have to revisit and come up with a decision at some point. So if I get caught in my own rationalizations and, I get sort of passive and apathic, then, well, that can lead me to literally experiencing myself never being able to make a decision. And as a result, then logically also never being able to trust in myself. So remember this, make your mind the tool, not the master of your choice. Okay. As far as your emotions is concerned, that's a whole different ball game. And if we have enough time, then we can go a little more specific about how to discern your own motivations, emotions, judgments, beliefs, and these inner impulses and sensations. But let's move on here to the second part of the assignment from part one, namely, well, what should we trust in more then? What should we trust in more? Based on what we have now learned, what we have now become, sort of more aware of. What should we start trusting more in? What should we trust more in? I mean, we've been talking about trust for 3 hours now. If we add both workshops together, more than 3 hours. What should we, from here
I think
on?
there's something in trusting thoughts, actions, and your inner guide. Well, the inner guide is it when
Mm-hmm.
it's all in congruence, but balance. I think trusting balance
Mm-hmm.
is something to quickly reground in, because
Mm-hmm.
when things are out of balance, it's a trust in that too, because it's happening for a reason to find balance. But I, at least on my side, I've not had the awareness of balance, and then when I came into awareness of balance, and then it didn't feel comfortable because I was a little bit more narrow-minded to trust in balancing out
Mm-hmm.
things.
So
Yeah.
we could always ask ourselves, am I balanced? Am I congruent? I need a reference feeling for this, as you said. You have to work with this. But when you feel balanced, when you feel congruent with something, then your inner guidance is typically also more accurate. Okay, because you in that moment you feel that this is your truth. Now your truth can change, so tomorrow you can learn something new and then it appears differently. But still, if you look back to your choice that you made the day before, which was based on, a balanced and congruent inner feeling, okay, you can still maintain the trust in yourself. I know that tomorrow I'm going to be a different person and I'm going to have different insights tomorrow, and all I can really do is to trust in my inner guidance, make sure it's balanced, make sure it's congruent, make sure that it represents my truth at that moment. And what I know tomorrow, I do not know today. So I do not need to judge myself for that. I can still keep the trust in myself intact.
Well, plus then I am speaking from my inner truth, and then that I'm
Mm-hmm.
the trusted person. If it's in the face of
Mm-hmm.
speaking to somebody new, it's not even like, oh, I'm talking this way now so that the person trusts me. It's that stance, like you're saying, from moment to moment before you take a step right or left, or, like pulling yourself together before having the conversation with the person so that you don't walk away feeling mesmerized or run over, and that you've been able to be your strong person in that situation, because obviously we wouldn't be looking at this if you're just talking to your dog. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
difficult. You have a loving time, but if you're talking to somebody who's new and it has to do with your money and it just doesn't seem right, then getting strong in yourself, not to overpower the person, but at least to walk away knowing that you've spoken intelligently to this person and expressed
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yeah, it has to do also with the freedom in that way, like, do I have the freedom to do that? Do I give the freedom? Yeah. So you brought up the subject of uh, persuasion or coercion. Okay, so I need to trust in the freedom of making a choice. Okay, that there is enough room. Okay, I need to trust in that. If I feel pressured, or if I don't have enough room, or for whatever reason, be it mindset, be it that I'm unfamiliar with something, but if I don't feel enough room to make a choice or the freedom of choice, all right, then there already is a problem. So a freedom of choice is extremely important here. We've already worked this out, that if we don't have that, we can't trust. So we have to trust in that more, and that then inevitably also means that we have to give the freedom of choice and the freedom of trust. Right? We have to check in with ourselves that we actually have the freedom to do this right now, if we want to trust. What about our inner connection? I mean, it has to do with the inner truth. In fact, I could put this here, because when do I feel my inner truth? When do I feel my inner balance? When do I feel inner congruence? When I feel connected, right? So I have to learn to trust in this more. And if it's not there, then I need to work on it. I need to prioritize it. Okay, so learning to trust in something more means to prioritize it, to give it more attention, to energize it more. Okay, so we're creating a list here of things, that basically a to-do list for all of us, that can help us to rebuild trust in ourselves by showing us what we need to prioritize. What about our empathy? Should we trust more, or should we trust less in our empathy? What do you guys think? I think it's very important to be able to trust in my own empathy, and also in my own willingness, to give things a sort of a soft eye, to see things from a loving perspective. I think that's very important, because it represents an important value for me. Okay, if you are working with people whose reference system is, say, money or self-gain, does this match up with your values? You have to ask that. Okay, let me put this first. Your inner values and what you stand for, what your stance is. That's very important, that you should trust in. Now, if this changes over time, that's fine. You can only make decisions based on that. But you need to trust in your own inner stance, not as in like assume it. No, you got to feel it. You got to feel your inner value, what you stand for, your inner integrity. And you got to feel something there that has to do with the mutuality that we talked about before, and whether things are reciprocal. Okay, without that, it's probably not worth trusting. You can't trust yourself either. What about your needs? Without knowing your needs or your desires, you don't need to know your goals in life. But yeah, exactly, Becky. You have to know what is real to you. What about your self-expression? What helps you to bring your own creativity, your own consciousness, your own insights into this world? The ability to self-express. That has a lot to do with room and freedom, but it's specifically, you know, your ability to form your own thoughts, your own insights, your own creativity. And what about your heart? How do you feel about that, trusting in your heart more? Yes, we have to differentiate. We have to discern between the heart and our emotions. Can we trust our emotions, guys? Not really. Why? Why can't we trust our emotions 100%?
The emotions are just the reactions to something that's happened or to a
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
It's not the true feeling of it.
Exactly. So let me just emphasize this here. So a heart feeling, we need to trust more in our heart feeling, not our emotions. And you're absolutely correct, Janet. Our emotions are a reaction to what is happening. Okay, they have to do with our mind, they have to do with our body, okay, and conditioning, instincts, all kinds of things, but not with who we truly are. We can become good at regulating our emotions and processing our emotions, and they are, just like our mind, very good tools, and they can serve our heart just as the mind should serve our heart. Okay, but we cannot trust in them alone. We have to feel into the body and feel into the totality of how we are feeling about something. So we have to have that connection with our body that can show us how our emotions are almost like robotic in a lot of cases.
I have two things. One, I feel both for me is a good practice, but also what is encouraged in like society is to trust in calmness and stillness. I find that like especially like even like I'm going to voice my opinion here, but like for some reason getting kids all riled up seems to be the right thing to do and that makes them happy, but that's really just kind of building a programming for emotional reaction to get people riled up
Yes.
and then lost that
And the
connection.
distraction
So
and the mesmerization that you mentioned earlier. Yeah,
yeah, it's
exactly.
not really always like the thing that it's not like, okay, be quiet, but just encouraging and being an example of calmness and um, not coldness, but calmness. Yeah, that's, I
And
think,
slowing down,
is,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, very good point, Janet. There's one more thing that comes up for me when I think about integrity.
I have
And
one,
yeah,
oh, go ahead. You're doing integrity.
no, go, you go ahead, Janet.
Oh, I just forgot. No
Oh,
way.
sorry.
Your turn.
You know, what should I trust in more? Okay, this has a lot to do with some of the core issues that many of you have, namely not knowing who you are, not knowing what your purpose is, and therefore constantly being confused about what you should trust in. Okay, is to really go into to trust into this ability for you to feel when something is right or wrong. Okay, so we have that compass, that truth compass in us. Okay, and our integrity, just like our emotions, just like our mind and our body, is a tool for that. So a truth compass is a tool that we can learn to trust in if we, just like with the mind, just like with emotion, just like with the body, if we cultivate it, if we develop it, if we work on it. for a lot of you, it's really simply just paying attention to it. And then, of course, you know, the inner guidance that we have, the promptings, okay, the gut feeling.
So there maybe to go along with the truth compass is this is what came to me often if we've been caught in addictions and all sorts of life experiences, things that are beneficial, like really trusting things that are simple and beneficial in one's life, that actually just sitting there and being happy, noticing what kind of happiness a cat or a dog or a bird has, as opposed to an emotional, riled up happiness, and finding that. So those sorts of states of being beneficial, or things that are beneficial, you know, admitting to oneself.
It's almost like here, what Becky mentioned, like being real, also what's natural or organic. You know, what doesn't have to be forced. But what you just mentioned, that I call the health compass here, is something that a lot of people actually never ask themselves, namely, is this or that healthy for me? A lot of toxic relationships, a lot of toxic habits, okay, be it food or certain social groups or certain activities, such as, you know, hanging out at Facebook for hours because we feel kind of lonely. Is this actually healthy to me? Is a very easy way to discern. And ultimately, also trusting in our energetic sensitivity. Many energetically sensitives, and especially the empaths, you know, amongst energetically sensitives, feel that it's kind of like a curse to feel all that. But what they don't realize is that it is an extremely wonderful tool. It just needs to be worked with. It needs to be trained. It needs to be calibrated. It needs to be authenticated for ourselves, because it's a subjective process. So we have to find out for ourselves what it means when I have this or this or this energetic sensation. Now, when you work with an energy coach, and there aren't many out there like myself, you know, I can give you certain things, guidelines and navigation help. I can say this often indicates that, or this usually or often means that. But we as humans are so complex and so unique in that way that the same energetic sensation for one person will never mean the same thing to another person. Okay, so that's really important to remember.
You know what's good with this? Because it's the same thing, and it's taken me a long time. There have been things that have been thrown at me that it basically kind of like numbed me in that area until I really could understand to trust in the work, that if you put in some work, you put in some effort towards something, especially if it's just a little change, that it's going to work, or something's going to work. That just trusting in the work, because obviously that kind of, it's very multidimensional, but to me that's an involvement and being awake again and connected as a dimension.
It leads to self-discovery. So the whole goal of us being here as spiritual beings with a 3D body is bringing our highest potential, our higher self, if you will, into expression. And we come to this world, we're born into this world as with all these tools that are not yet calibrated, that are not yet used, that are not worn in yet. We have to work them to recognize that the body has these and these functions, and you know, and how it works, and how to best deal with it and how to best to maintain it and how to make it work for you. The same with the emotions. Emotions have a function. We have to work with them. We have to process them, and we have to find out what these emotions are telling us, what kind of signals they provide for us, and learn that it's a wonderful tool if we don't need to repress them, don't need to be afraid of them, if we don't have to deceive ourselves about certain things or have to avoid them. And the same with our mind is a wonderful tool. Logic is a wonderful tool. Epistemology is a wonderful tool, but we have to recognize that there's also this self-deceiving aspect of that. And that, the mind can get caught in itself. And neither the body, nor our emotions, nor our mind can transcend themselves. They require, or transcendence requires, a higher vibratory tool. And what is that? That's our consciousness, guys. That's a tool that we have as well. And that needs to be trained as well. Spiritual work is not just some nice idea or some mentalization or idealization. Enlightenment is not some gettingness or achievement. It's a necessity. It's vital for us to make sense of why we're here and what this being a spiritual being in this 3D body really means. And ultimately, what we can really be. So you see, the subject of trust brings in aspects and work on all these levels of our existence. And then for those of you, obviously here within the sacred self-healing experience, you are used to this, also the energetic perspective. There are mechanics, there are dynamics, there are tools that we have in regards to working with energies and the multidimensional aspects and so forth, that we can only find out about if we actually work with them. So yes, Janet, absolutely. It takes work, but it's also very rewarding, because this is where purpose and fulfillment and ultimately also happiness and joy come from. To recognize this self-discovery journey as the most exciting thing ever. And that self-healing is not the process of removing our flaws or becoming more perfect or something like that. It's about really growing into this potential here on 3D in this lifetime. So authenticity then is where this matches up. It's related to congruence. But authenticity is a step further than congruence. Congruence is something that we can feel within, because when we have an inner conflict, things don't match up. And it feels very uncomfortable for everybody. Whereas when we are congruent and when we feel one with whatever the choice is that we have to make, then we are feeling something like an inner peace or calmness or stillness. There's the absence of all the struggle and all the suffering and all this back and forth and all this inner confliction. So authenticity is the process of discerning truth. So we need to learn how to test authenticity. And as we are learning how to do this with ourselves, we are automatically also learning to do this with others. This is a cool thing. You don't have to learn I mean, sometimes it's good to educate yourself on what sort of the most common mind control techniques are, just so you open your mind a little more and say, oh my God, you know, in my life I've fallen for 8 out of 10 most common mind control techniques. So we probably all have. All right, but it begins within ourselves. So the more authentic we are with ourselves, the less susceptible we are to outer manipulation, outer control, or deception. So it's really all about learning how to remove self-deception. Because in this world where we have an ego mind, where we have a body, where we have emotions, our biggest problem is the duality of this 3D existence. The fact that we are actually higher vibratory beings, spiritual beings, energetic beings in a 3D, not just body, but also environment. And that means that we are constantly asked to discern truth and to question our perception, not ourself, but our perception. And someone who's authentic doesn't need to question themselves, but they still need to check on their perception. So here, the questions for you that help you to test your authenticity. And this is a big part of the Sacred Self-Healing course, weaving through all the different dimensions of self. What is your motivation? And what is your possible secondary gain or payoff? Always ask yourself that. You know, sometimes we are so caught in our false self, we are identifying with things that we lose track of our intention. Or sometimes we're not even questioning the purpose of things. And this is a big problem here with all these big questions in life. Who am I? And so forth. Okay, we got to ask ourselves, oh, wait a minute. You know, maybe I'm just not seeing it. Okay, because I'm too focused on external things. Maybe I'm just simply too externalized to answer these questions and to know what my true motivation is and why it doesn't match up. So I have to, you know, find out why I am investing in certain things, why I am energizing certain things. This is always the first question that you need to ask yourself. Why am I doing this? What am I getting out of this? Then questioning your emotions, the perception of your emotion. How do you deal with your emotions? Now, are you someone who tries to avoid confrontation at all cost? Are you someone who's afraid of big emotions, of intensity? You running away or avoiding emotions altogether? Are you afraid of negative emotions? You only want the good emotions, but not the bad emotions, so you suppress them? Now, how do you deal with your emotions often leads you to finding out what you're afraid of. So it's linked to our fears. What's my fear here? Then you need to ask yourself, how mind locked are you right now? How judgmental are you? Am I just seeing it this way because I have a certain, you know, sort of rigid mindset that it has to be that way? Unquestioned? It just has to be that way? I have to be perfect? Things have to be right? Okay, these things, you got to question those. Next is, what is the framework? What is the belief system? What's the mindset behind this? Whatever thought you have or whatever emotional response you have towards an event or towards something that is happening to you. Sometimes even, you know, your physical reaction to something that is happening to you. What's the belief behind that? Good example here is the corona fear. Okay. The reason why people are so afraid of getting infected with COVID-19 is because they have been conditioned to believe that when you test positive, well, you're very close to dying. Okay, this is the end of you. That's a belief system, nothing more. The truth is, and every integrous scientist has to admit that we don't even have enough data to know all this yet. We don't even know what leads to, this mortality. We don't even know what the mortality rate is. There's no way of telling right now, and yet we've all been conditioned with this fear. That's the end of everything. And not to say that we shouldn't take it seriously, but we need to question the mindset, the belief system that's behind that. What if we find out that it's a blessing? What if we find out that it leads to our bodies to upgrade? I'm just saying, I'm not saying it is, but it could be. But the same with the vaccines, it's the other way around. Everybody believes that we need vaccines and that's the only way to stop this. That's a belief, guys. Every integrous scientist will say to you, we don't know that yet. We don't even know if the vaccines actually prevent a COVID infection. In fact, most likely not. Every integrous scientist will admit that the vaccines are not there to protect you from getting infected, but mostly, from preventing a severe disease, severe symptoms, and mortality. So what do we know? We don't know. So right now we can't control that. Next is our conclusions. How are we then responding to all this, to our inner sensations, to, our fears, to our beliefs? We need to question that. Not ourselves, but our responses and how we communicate this. And then the last two things that you can do to test your own authenticity, because those are general conditions that lead to inauthenticity and, you not fully being able to trust in yourself, is there an unmet need right now? If I'm hungry, if I'm tired, if I don't feel loved, if I don't feel safe in my relationship, it's very difficult to be authentic. So inquire about your unmet need. Let me rephrase that. And then those of you who already know what your integrity is and what your goals are in life, you can ask yourself, what would my love do? What would my empathy do? What would be the more loving way? What would be, I don't want to call it the higher route, but what would be the higher vibratory solution here? What would I do if I didn't have any fears, if I didn't have any beliefs, if I wasn't mind locked, if I didn't have a secondary gain or a payoff? What would unconditionality do here? So this is just for you to, form a roadmap for yourself. Self-compassion, forgiveness are extremely important tools for trusting in ourselves and trusting in others, simply because they acknowledge our own fallibility and they support rebuilding trust. Without the willingness to give ourselves or others a second chance, or a third or a fourth chance, it doesn't matter. It has to do with redeeming, has to do with contrition, has to do with repentance. It has to do with all these words that you've probably heard in context with religious work. Okay. the willingness to forgive, the willingness to trust. It's the same. And believing in trust. Recognizing that trust increases our vibratory states, our energy, our being, our goals, and all the outcomes. And then ultimately choosing to trust. Trusting is a choice. It's a conscious choice that requires truth, room to grow, the freedom, as we've worked out, self-compassion and empathy. And this has to be a very conscious choice. And if we do not want to trust, we can choose otherwise, but then we cannot be an illusion about it. And we cannot be in an illusion about why we can't trust in ourselves. Because it has to be the result of a self-motivated, continual and conscious choice for self-growth, self-awareness, self-responsibility, and connection with self, the work, as we called it earlier. And this is then ultimately what allows us to trust in life force, and life itself, and recognizing that life itself is the continual growth, the continual connection and interaction in love, truth, and freedom. So, yeah, summarizing here, we're coming to a close now. Rebuilding trust in ourselves requires these steps: self-inquiry, self-discovery, learning to discern, learning to internalize, learning to shift when we notice self-deceit or some kind of error perception, recontextualizing, then integrating the whole thing, bringing it into an expression, communicating it, that's all actualizing it, following through, becoming it. And ultimately, recognizing that trust means that there simply are that things that I cannot control, and I surrender my control instead of believing I could, this is a false belief, could control life. I can't. So there's a surrendering, and that surrendering is closely related to grace and also to forgiveness. To say, you know what, everybody can make these mistakes. Everybody can be in a place of incongruence, in a place of not being able to discern truth. And I choose to trust regardless. Because if I can trust, I can grow. And if I can grow, I know I'm alive. So we've come to an end here. On a note, I think that is extremely important, namely how our aliveness is directly linked to trust. So thank you guys for your wonderful work here, for sharing, for working all this out. For another, many people will watch this video, listen to the recording, and gain from your insights and sharing. So in that way, you are trusting me, okay, and these people that you don't know that are listening to this webinar, to this workshop. And you can trust in that because you know what your intentions are. You all came here for this inner experience of your higher self and the expression of that, namely through sharing. And for that, I am very grateful, and I want to thank you all and congratulate you for showing to yourself that you are alive and that you can trust. Because every time you choose to trust, you grow. Thank you, everyone. Love you and see you soon. for our next Sacred Self-Healing Experience workshop. Awesome. Bye-bye.